Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Solid Ground, a live show where we discuss the political, the cultural, the social, the faith-based issues, anything which captures my attention over the last 48 hours. We talk the issues of the day live here on Solid Ground. So welcome to all of you. I can see the comments already streaming in, everyone telling me, if I'm doing a very quick summary, that it's rather chilly out there in New Zealand and around New Zealand. It is certainly rather cold here. It's 2 degrees, or rather it was 2 degrees in my little treehouse studio, which for a man wearing a t-shirt was cold. Fortunately, I have a little heater which is doing its best at the moment to try and warm me up, but if all of a sudden I turn blue, you'll know what's happening. But as I say, good morning, welcome. Look for new first-timers. As I say, a live show. I'm coming to you live from Auckland. And I take questions and comments very happily, and to the best of my ability. I often get overwhelmed with the numbers coming through. But if you want to make a comment, please do. But know that if you're commenting on Family First YouTube channel or on its Facebook page, then those comments are coming into me live in the studio. If you're commenting, say, on my Facebook page or Instagram, Substack, that is fantastic. I go and read those afterwards. But to come in live into the studio, as I say, jump on to... I'm trying to get to them, actually. I seem to have lost the first one. Foo Dogs Trucking was the first, I think was the first on this morning. But yeah, if you're on the Facebook or YouTube channel of Family First, then the comments come to me and I'm able to do this. So good morning to everyone. I'll spend just a couple of moments there. We've got Muddy Waters saying they're in the hinterland of Inver. For people overseas, that's Invercargill, almost at the very South Island of New Zealand. Darren, lovely to have you along. NZ Knitter, good morning. Here was me, Lynette, thinking 2 degrees was cold, but it's minus 2.2 in lovely Christchurch. Getting distracted because Rosie from Taupo, cold as well. Chilly in Te Awamutu, Nigel tells me. Jackie's telling me it's chilly in Reitihi. Where is it not cold? Good morning, Samuel, lovely to have you along. Catherine, good morning. Good to have you here. Fourth Adam, good morning as well. Bernice is asking, how do we get one of the... We've run out, Bernice. We've run out. So 2 things, though, on the positive. We are trying to source a new supply of mugs. Where we got these originally, that company's gone under, not because they were producing solid ground mugs. And secondly, hopefully we're going to have those in time for the Forum on the Family in September. So people will be able to obviously get them there, or I'll be able to actually maybe sell them again as I did. Well, when I sold them last time, it was really only to cover costs. In fact, a little bit of a loss. But anyway, they're coming. But yes, they're all sold out. I kid you not. And it became a bit of a joke between Bob and I, because he has his Daybreak mugs and I have mine. So mine have all sold out. Bob's haven't yet. Though there is some suggestion of foul play in that my wife was the one busy selling them at the Forum last year. But anyway, all these conspiracies. And hello from the other Jackie. Good morning. Lovely to have you along. I see Abby's telling me that it's freezing cold in Rotorua. Viv is telling us, good morning, Viv. A cold, clear day in Tairua. Lovely. Fine but cool, Lisa's telling us, in Golden Bay. And Chili in the Wire wrapper. Yeah, I think clearly has been a very, very cold start. But I don't know about you guys. And isn't it very New Zealand to talk about the weather? It's part of our British heritage, I suspect. It's finally winter. Rach and I were talking the other day of just how, well, where has winter been? Anyway, here we are. Rosie's asking, had I heard about Action Station's petition about blocking the Defining a Man and a Woman bill? Yes, I have. It seems all the woke crew here in New Zealand, it doesn't matter if it's Amnesty International through to Action Stations, they've all lost their rag around this Defining a Man and a Woman bill, and they're doing all and everything they can to block it. To people like myself, It just shows how unhinged they are becoming. Not only are they unable to define a man and a woman, I mean, good Lord, how do they define blue, black, white? What's a sky and what's a piece of earth? What's so fundamentally basic? But it's also the way that they're panicking tells you really, as I said earlier, they're unhinged because it's not a reasonable, rational approach. The other quick thing I'd note, and you hear it from the likes of Chloe Swarbrick often, it's all about the science and evidence-based. Have you noticed that those who often deploy those words actually mean the opposite? There's probably a psychological or a term for that. But I do notice those mostly running about screaming and yelling, oh, this is the science is settled, oh, it's evidence-based, usually don't actually know what science is or have the evidence. It's just, crazy. Absolutely crazy. But look, I do encourage people, just as a segue on that, when I find my right tile, can I find it? I can, look at that. I've got about 70, imagine like 70 squares on my screen, which I navigate to try and bring up different things. So suggesting that people do a submission, kudos to Lynette, and I know others of you have as well. Send in a submission to the select committee. If you want some guidance, not that you need it, but if you want some guidance, you can jump on to the Family First website. We've got a lot of information there. But unlike the other side, just be polite, courteous, and just explain reality, and that will go a long way. And I have to laugh actually on that too, because I see it's called the Opportunities Party. It's actually quite a left-wing party. It's trying to promote itself as centrist, but actually when you read its policies, very much to the left. They have been putting out some stuff at the moment, again, around the definition of a woman and a man, saying, who cares, it's irrelevant. I just thought it was funny because this little party, being promoted by the media, by the way, if you're seeing a lot of coverage of the Opportunities Party in the mainstream media, it's because the mainstream media are doing its best to promote them. But what is striking is that the likes of the Opportunity Party, the Labour Party, the Māori Party, the Greens, they have no idea what a woman is. Yet all four of them very much know what extra taxes are, because that's what they're all talking about. So isn't it remarkable? No idea what a woman is if you're on the left of politics, it seems, but definitely know what taxes are. Absolutely crazy. Anyway, Lisa's saying working on a solution. That is fantastic. Nigel's done. That is brilliant. And someone has said something, so I'm seeing other comments on comments, but I can't see where the original is. Anyway, I shall stop there and actually get on to some topics. Obviously, look, one of the big pieces of news is this absolutely horrific killing, granted in Ireland, in Northern Ireland to be more precise, in Belfast. Absolutely tragic. I'm actually off to Europe in a few weeks, and I'm going to be fascinated, and it includes the UK. Granted, I'm not going to Belfast or Northern Ireland. I'm going to be interested to get the feeling on the ground, but one can't help feel, or maybe I can't help feel, to phrase it that way, there's a big shift happening in the likes of the UK and other parts of Europe. It seems almost weekly now that we have attacks of this nature. And, people seem to act surprised and shocked, but this is just one of probably hundreds of attacks that have been happening. Obviously, was it 2 weeks ago, granted in Switzerland, another man similar to this drove his car I'm mixing it up. There was a guy who drove his car, killed people. There was another attack at a train station with knives. It's all terribly predictable. And the police in Belfast, to give them credit, were very quick to point out that he's Sudanese, actually a refugee. They were very quick, of course, to say he's there legally, and this wasn't an act of terrorism. And I wrote about this in a Substack the other day, not this particular attack, but what's happening here is the use and misuse of information to try and cloud the situation. And those are two, I would argue, quick points there. The police, good, they're giving you information, but very quick to say, look, he's legally here as a refugee. That doesn't take away from the fact that he decided to go out with a knife and try to behead someone. Look, again, that is a very particular action, whether it's driving cars into people or, as I say, knives and necks, unfortunately is a lot to do with Islam. And we've got to call it for what it is, and that's an element which has been failed in the UK and elsewhere, and I'll come to that in a moment. The second element, they said it's not an act of terror. Now, we can debate the wherefores and whys of that. It's up to the police, of course, to make that decision. But it doesn't need to be an act of terror. This is a rinse and repeat of behaviours we just keep seeing over and over again in the UK. And to a degree, you saw it in Bondi Beach as well. Same groups of people, same motivations, same tactics. Knives, necks, beheadings, cars, civilians, innocent citizens, so on and so forth. We should not be surprised, is what I'm saying. We should not be surprised. And what has to happen is actually, particularly for the people of the UK, here's me preaching from the colonies, need to have a free and frank discussion. Good morning to Dennis. Lovely to have you along. So I'm looking at all these. I've seen. Yeah, it is a tinderbox, and as I say, I'm going to be there soon. So I'm looking forward. Well, not looking forward. It'll be interesting to be there in person, meeting various people and just being on the streets and getting a bit of a sense. I'll try to do some solid grounds actually while I'm away and update you. But I mean, a horrid attack, terrible attack. But the other striking element, and it's twofold, and it's also what happened in Bondi. We've seen it happen here in New Zealand around different things. As I say, I wrote it recently in the Substack. Either the politicians work very quickly to pour cold water, they just don't want to talk about things, or they begin to deflect. And within minutes of this gruesome, horrid attack, you already had the likes of Sir Keir Starmer, he's the Prime Minister, and others very quickly trying to avoid discussing who and why and what the motivations were, and very swiftly starting to challenge and label people far-right, anti-immigration. And if you're picking up the papers now, already the attack itself, the attacker, the motivations, is being pushed to the side. The obsession with the legacy media and the political leadership is around what they term the far-right and anti-immigration side. They're vilifying the citizens who are saying this is horrific and this needs to stop. And so we need to call that out. I mean, even down here in New Zealand, not so much that we need to be involved in British politics, but we need to see the same dynamics in play if they are occurring here in New Zealand. And one of the tactics, and I'll move on, is always blaming the other side. I don't see a lot of the people who are getting upset in the likes of the UK or France as anti-immigration in that sense, or far-right terrorists. They're citizens who are angry that people coming from overseas are coming into their country and killing them. I don't think that makes someone far-right. I don't think it makes someone, in a sense, anti-immigration. But notice, as I say, how very quickly in the British legacy media and through its political elite that they're framing everything to attack the citizens who are concerned about what's happening. They become the focus of the news, not the horrific attacks. And then speaking of that, I came across a video, I think it was on Fox News, it doesn't matter where it comes from, but it's in the United States. You might remember there's a group called the Southern Poverty Law Center, or the SPLC. I spoke about them a little while back here on Solid Ground, and I'm sure Bob did on Daybreak as well, because the SPLC basically markets itself as an anti-racism, anti-bigotry, anti-hate group, and it tends to list a large array of organisations that it deems to be basically hate groups, and that's their raison d'etre. They name and shame supposedly hate groups. What is striking is, as we talked a few weeks ago, is that actually the SPLC, the Southern Poverty Law Centre, has been funding actual extremist groups to then justify its existence. But there's a really interesting interchange that the head of the Southern Poverty Law Centre, the SPLC, had with a senator recently. And I'll let you listen to it because I just thought it was quite amusing. It basically, though, is the senator pointing out that this supposedly, non-partisan, neutral group that's meant to identify hate groups really only seems to pick on Christians. But have a listen.
The Family Research Council is an anti-LGBTQ.
Okay, so on your website, you used to have language on there defending your position on the Family Research Council, and you had language saying that other groups, like Focus on the Family, are not included, and you use that as your defense. Well, that language is now gone, and Focus on the Family is now noted as a hate group.
Mr. Roy.
Can you explain that?
Congressman Roy, we take no pleasure in listing any group, and we wish the list was empty. But we have the constitutional right to express our opinion.
How many leftist anti-Jewish groups do you have listed on your website?
We
name them.
Anyone listening to this can go to our website and see our year in hate and extremism report was released this morning.
How many extremist Islamic groups do you have of the 1,500 or so organizations you have on your hate map?
Again, anyone can go to our website.
My office has been looking over it and we can't really find one.
Again, it is the SPLC's.
You think
right.
SPLC could provide us a list of the Islamic-oriented groups do you have on your hate map?
Mr. Roy, we don't target any group because of its religion.
Really?
I want to be clear about that.
Really?
Yes, that's exactly right. We target no group because of its religion. We target groups because they express statements and engage in activities that demean and vilify.
So you brought up LGBTQ groups a second
Mr.
ago.
Roy.
So you brought up LGBT groups a minute ago. So you think there's a bunch of Islamic groups that are pro-LGBTQ? Is that the position of the SPLC?
Look, I just found it darkly amusing. Amusing because it is at one level it's quite funny, but at another it's also quite dangerous. And these are the dynamics, unfortunately, we are seeing around the Western world. So in this case here, as the Senator's pointing out, this supposedly rigorous group, the SPLC, it's meant to be fair, but it's not. And actually, if you know anything about the SPLC, they are exceptionally biased. So many Christian groups, many pro-family, pro-life groups are listed as hate groups. And as someone has mentioned here, Muddy Waters, I think, it's jumped on me. Absolutely, Family First would be. In fact, some of the people that I've talked to on this show are listed as hate groups, supposedly. So from Katie Fowles, who said focus on the family, all of these groups, we know these people, they're out there actually advocating for mums and dads and children. But according to the Southern Poverty Law Centre, they are hate groups. And yes, I'm sure if New Zealand was in their remit, we would be listed. But the Senator's rightly pointed out none of the anti-Semitic, Jew-hating groups in America are on the list, and there are no Islamic groups, which is remarkable, as he also points out that, like actually more traditional Christianity, the views around homosexuality are quite clear, but nothing in that realm. So just absolute contradictions left, right, and centre. And if you're wondering, well, how does this relate to New Zealand? Well, just look at how codes of conduct at various places, or even what's been happening recently in the New Zealand Army, where actually ideas, Christian ideas in particular, are being sidelined. Your conscience rights, your freedom to believe, your freedom of speech is being eroded. So it's just something to be aware of. Often we will point, here at Family First to things happening overseas, but, excuse me, but understand that there is dynamics at play here in New Zealand as well. And the thing to watch for, I would suggest, is again codes of conduct which have been weaponized against people. Instead, the most recent example, I talked about it on Tuesday, was the New Zealand Army embracing all the pagan gods, and that every soldier needed to acknowledge those. They had to learn songs and prayers. This is our army, by the way. I'd much prefer them, as I think I said on Tuesday, to be much more efficient, using the Mars Light weapon system than actually being able to recite prayers. Pot of Gold says only pro-life. Well, this is actually part of the problem with the Southern Poverty Law Centre. They are obsessed with groups that are pro-life, but we're not unfamiliar with that here in New Zealand. You'll note any time that a group, doesn't even have to be Family First, pushes back against usually the more extreme left wing. I really want to make a distinction there. I know a lot of good people on the left of politics, the traditional left of politics. But actually those are on the far left of politics, very woke, progressive, what do we want to call them. They are very quick to label anyone who stands in their way as a bigot or hateful and so on and so forth. I mean, gosh, we can even go back to the COVID days when, Kiwis were expressing their concerns. You had, was it Michael Wood talking of rivers of filth, Family First, we get it in the neck, as someone who's proudly conservative, always sort of been derided. Again, it's just par for the course. I'm not saying that with any, I don't know what's the word, upset. It's just the reality. But they're very good at trying to label people. And coming back to our first topic, actually, when, the definition of a man and a woman, that's mainly what you're seeing in the mainstream media, is attacking anybody who's saying, well, actually, there's some merit to this as being bigoted, hateful, somehow picking on a group. It's just, it's insane, but it is what it is. Shane's saying, never thought that the army would go woke. No, I would have hoped it wouldn't, but we are sadly seeing sort of I don't know, it sounds a bit more conspiratorial, it's not meant to, but sort of a woke infiltration of all our institutions, which makes it much, much harder to root out. And so we just got to keep working at it, exposing it, shedding light on it. So Alex Penk was the one who actually did a series of OIAs. I know Alex, he's part of what's called the Ethos Alliance, tries to protect Kiwis' conscience rights and freedoms of belief. So he did some OIAs to the army and flushed out more of this information, which is good because now we can talk about it. But unfortunately, it's right through. I mean, we see it in the police, sadly, as well. I mean, going right back to the recent case of Henry Novick, who was killed in the United Kingdom, the 18-year-old. Again, claims of racism, false claims of racism, we should say, were believed by the police officers rather than the young man bleeding out in front of them. Why? It's because of their training. Which is interesting, actually, and Bob and I will talk about it on Political Playback tonight. Of course, the police officer, very senior police officer here in New Zealand, who's been in charge of iwi liaisons and ethnic engagement and so on, has jumped from being a very senior police officer to running for Parliament. It's all very suspicious, I'd have to say, certainly in my mind, and not a particularly good look for him, Labour or the police, but yeah, he's just indicative of the problem that we have right in the hierarchy of the police. Here's a guy whose whole job is to promote ethnic and iwi narratives into the police force. I mean, it's just crazy. In fact, I'd be fascinated to know to what extent he even knew about all these police that were going over to China and being wined and dined by the CCP. Anyway, we'll talk more about that on Political Playback tonight. That'll be, again, a live show for newbies here. Bob and I talking New Zealand politics of the last week, and as always, no shortage. Speaking of other things, this is the latest. I'm sure Bob has touched on this. Absolute absurdity coming out of HelloFresh. So we're now Pride Month, I think. Are we coming up to Pride Month? I don't know. I'm sorry, excuse me. Might just take a bit of my coffee from my mug that I don't have any more of yet. I've lost track. We've had Pride days, weeks, months. I mean, basically, on the current trajectory, it's just going to be an indoctrination all year long. But this is HelloFresh. To be fair, it's not strictly the New Zealand company, but still, HelloFresh is HelloFresh. I'm not even sure how best to describe it. I think it's awful social media post, which has actually offended a number of, certainly my gay and lesbian friends. I've seen actually everyone from Annie O'Brien to Chris Lynch commenting on this themselves, saying this is just deeply inappropriate. Basically, it's a food company meant to be pitching to mums and dads and families, and it's making basically rather, I was going to say putrid, is that the right word? Awful comments around anal sex, basically. I'm sorry to throw those two words out early in the morning, but that's what this is all about. And so, really, it's just, where do we even start? I'm sorry to put it, where do you even start with this? It is just so absurd, rude, unbecoming. But I think also, and I think it's really important to underline this, I think it's really insulting to many New Zealanders and anyone around the world in our lesbian and gay community. It stereotypes them as just weird people, which I don't think is appropriate at all, because it really just, what HelloFresh is doing here is just reinforcing a stereotype that it's all just about sex. I just think terrible. So yeah, why bother dealing with the likes of HelloFresh, honestly, if that's what they're obsessed with. And then the other one, this is again coming out of the UK, but this is a good illustration of just how ridiculous and absurd and detached from reality the DEI, the anti-racist, all of those progressives are becoming. This was a post initially put out by a publishing company called Ladybird. And the absolute absurdity of this is supposedly a lesbian couple coming home with their IVF baby, because there'd be no other way they could have a child, to meet then a disabled child. I mean, so it's basically woke image on woke image here, which is ridiculous. Now, look, I think Five Pillars is actually a Muslim group who's calling it out, but it's just, why do they share this? Again, it's the UK, but we have it here in New Zealand too. The lies tied within lies, the fanciful and the impossible almost, And it's summed up by this person here, Madeline Grant, who's talking about them and said, I just love the idea that after presumably coming out to her community, so it's talking about the woman in the hijab, doing IVF, raising 2 children with her non-Muslim tattooed lesbian life partner, the woman in question remains committed to full Islamic modesty dress. I think Madeline nails it. It's just the absurdities built into absurdities. And we have it here in New Zealand around a lot of the imagery. You have it within the UN. You might remember about 4 or 5 months ago, I actually ran a video from the UN around Women's Day, which was just so messed up and confused. You see it here in New Zealand. We see it in our ads. Impossible and stupid situation. So this is an ad, just a cartoon, but it's nearly impossible and fanciful, and it just begins to show you the level of delusion which we're dealing with. We're dealing with a high level of delusion in society by these people pushing it, and it comes right back to that definition of a man and woman. But it's also leading to change. And look, Bob sent me this video. It's got to do with Pauline Hanson, and I'm not here to wave a flag for her, but I'm just going to play a short clip about her and what's happening in Australia, and I'll just finish with a comment on that.
New polling's revealed it's women driving the surge of Pauline Hanson's One Nation. The party's attracting more support from the ladies than men for the first time. Research by Resolve Poll Monitor also shows the party's gaining ground amongst younger Australians, wealthier voters, and also inner city residents, broadening its traditional base.
So, again, Australian politics, and not here to wave big flags for Pauline per se. I actually don't mind some of her stuff. Other stuff makes me think it's a bit crazy or lacks depth. But long and short, there is a reaction happening. Things have become, in Australia, but it's happening in the UK too, so absurd, so stupid, that you're now seeing in this case women voters, younger voters, those in the inner city, traditionally being quite liberal, actually moving towards the right of politics, to someone like Pauline Hanson. You're seeing the likes of Rupert Lowe, Nigel Farage in the UK. Arguably here in New Zealand, people heading towards New Zealand first. And so I think it's quite striking if you look at Australia that there's just, as I say, we've not quite, I think, reached peak absurdity. But even those demographics you would expect to be drawn in by progressive naivety are now moving actually towards the centre-right. And at one level, that's a good thing, says me in a bias. Another does always worry that people will just go after those who sound good but don't necessarily have the depth of policies. But look, as I say, we're in a strange world. As we started the show, we have people here in New Zealand who don't know what a woman is, but definitely know what taxes are, and I'm very happy to put them on you. Looking at the UK, that terrible, it sounds like it was an attempted beheading, where the politicians and the media cannot bring themselves to actually say, what are the motivations, or even to focus on the attacker and how he even got into the country. Instead, they try to gaslight the public for being upset. That's another absurdity. As I say, the Southern Poverty Law Centre always making Christian groups, hate groups supposedly, but none of the anti-Semitic pro-Hamas groups or any Islamic groups. Oh, no, they're all fine. So again, glaring contradictions. And then, as I say, the absurdity of these cartoons where all of these supposed victim groups that actually don't sit well with one another. It is just nuts. It's nuts. Yes, Raywin's just noted, actually, and I'll finish on this. Yeah, this is actually, thank you, Raywin. She's saying this is the New Zealand Army did a training exercise earlier this year, hunting out radical Christians. Yeah, I think we may have touched on it briefly. Look, absolutely stupid, but that's again the doublespeak. No one is worried about extremist Christians in New Zealand. They're worried about Islam in New Zealand. They're worried about the extremism that we are seeing around the world. And so again, it's the doublespeak. Now, I'm happy to call it out. I think most of you would understand what's happening, but the army has to do an exercise promoting the absurd, hiding from the facts. Actually, it's twofold now that I say it out loud. One, it's hiding from the reality. We all know what groups they're thinking about. But at the same time, and secondly, they're prepared to insult another group, which has got nothing to do with it. So, absolutely tragic. It's a society we live in, but we keep pushing against it. And actually, I still remain hopeful. As I say, beginning to see shifts in the polls. We're seeing people, if you will, beginning to wake up and go, hold on a moment, this has really gone quite silly. Anyway, I should leave it there. I actually have a full day of podcasts to do, as I mentioned at the start, because I'm heading overseas. I might, just before I sign off, this from Food Dogs Trucking, if I say I don't know what taxes are, does that mean I don't have to pay them? Gosh, wouldn't that be great? Would that not be great? Excellent comment there, but no, as I say, I've got a full day of podcasting. I'm trying to actually build up a library of them, if you will, because I'm away for quite a few weeks and on the road overseas, particularly in likes of London. It's going to be hard for me to do recording. So that's my day today, but hopefully I'll see you guys back. Oh, by the way, latest Family Matters is dropped. I talked to Faroe Amin. She's a New Zealander and Iranian. She shares her thoughts and experience around what's happening in Iran at the moment. I think, if you're following the conflict in the Middle East, that's a must listen. Otherwise, as I say, come and see us on Political Playback tonight. There'll be no shortage of topics as always, but I hope, as always, you have a great day.